Bush Inn in Norfolk is your typical English inn of the 19th century, but only in appearance. The Bush Inn is the longest running pub in all of Australia. Its foundation in 1815 makes the Tasmanian pub one of the oldest, if not the oldest pub in all of Australia, and is about 201 years old. The Bush Inn was opened in 1815, but it was not until the 29th of September 1825 that the Norfolk pub was opened under a long unbroken line of licences. Anne Bridger was the first to open the Bush Inn in this line of unbroken licence successions. She has been titled Tasmania's first female entrepreneur. Anne Bridger, 52 and widowed, was transported by the British rig Thalia from the Cape of Good Hope, arriving in Hobart in 1823. Anne brought with her 3 children, Henry 19, Eliza 18 and Anne 15. They had £500 in cash and £200 in various merchandise from agricultural investments. It was not long until Anne in her adopted home entered into a business, becoming the proprietor of the Black Snake Inn at Black Snake, or as it is now known as Granton. The Black Snake Inn prior to Anne Bridger had a reputation of being a rough, sly grog shop, an unlicensed den of iniquity, a shady place for thieves and drunks. However, Bridger turned the shady den around, transforming the establishment into a respectable public house. Many travellers passed through the inn on their way to Norfolk, making the inn somewhat of a halfway house. Norfolk, 38 km from Hobart, was the third established colony in Tasmania, and it was quickly growing during the 1820s. This immense growth created future opportunity for many entrepreneurs who were seeking fortune, and Anne was thinking along similar lines. In 1825, she acquired the licence for the Bush Inn and moved her family there, taking up the financial opportunity and becoming an important figure in the early settlement of Norfolk. The Bush Inn was among the few substantial structures in Norfolk and had an important function in the colony. This function was not just for providing the typical leisure, relaxation and accommodation for journeying guests, but for providing Methodists, local officials and business groups the space to undertake their desired activities. Local Methodists, for example, used a tap room to hold their services. Similarly, a business group who gathered to discuss the building of a toll bridge across the Derwent held their conference in the same tap room. This was in 1838, and by 1841 the first bridge was built, stretching across the inland Derwent River. The Bush Inn could also have a historic connection to the well-known Royal Derwent Hospital. Under the Bush Inn runs a long tunnel to the Royal Derwent, dating back to at least the 1840s, based on the convict handmade brickwork that still have the convict arrow symbols. Claims suggest that the tunnels were used to transport patients to the Royal Derwent in order to keep patients out of the eye of the public. However, recent archaeological evaluations have thrown doubt into the tunnel theory, suggesting that it is entirely possible that it is simply a large sewer drain. The Bush Inn's rich history does not stop here. The pub has its own claim to fame, with either famous figures or historic events taking place within the inn. The inn enjoyed visits and patronage from Sir John and Lady Franklin. Lady Franklin is said to have planted a pear tree in the hotel's gardens after visiting in 1837. The tree still bears fruit to this day. It is commonly acknowledged that in 1838 the Irish composer William Vincent Wallace, inspired by Norfolk's beautiful rural atmosphere, wrote the theme song to his famous opera, Maritana. He was said to have sat on the balcony overlooking the local countryside whilst he composed it. Almost 100 years later, in 1924, Dame Melba would visit the Bush Inn and sing some lines of the Maritana. Dame Melba, or Nellie Melba, was one of Australia's most famous Victorian operatic singers and performers. Melba would be surprised to find that the Maritana had been composed at the Bush Inn, leading her to burst out into song for all of the guests. On the 29th of June 1932, the Maritana would be broadcast through the national network from the Bush Inn itself. This would be the first time in the world that a composition would be produced and presented from its place of origin. Only a decade after the invention of the telephone by Graham Bell, the Bush Inn in 1888 would host the first trunk telephone call in Australia. The call was made by the proprietor Captain Blocky. By 1939, the first overseas phone call from Australia was made from the Bush Inn, connecting to London. Until the mid-1970s, the hotel's phone number was simply 1, reflecting its historic importance in modern communication.